He did not arrive with a crash of thunder or a flash of fire. There was no dramatic entrance, no fanfare. One moment the space between two colossal cloud towers was empty. The next, he was simply there. He was calm, so utterly calm. His form was humanoid, draped in shadows that seemed to cling to him like a well-worn coat. There were no horns, no tail, no pitchfork. His face, when it could be glimpsed, was smooth, almost bland, and entirely emotionless. Yet an undeniable aura radiated from him, an ancient power that chilled the already cold air further. This was the devil. A collective gasp, a silent psychic scream rippled through the assembled souls. It was not a sound but a wave of pure, undiluted fear that washed over them. The shimmering forms recoiled, drawing back as if from a sudden intense heat, though his presence was the epitome of cold. No one spoke. No one dared to move more than that involuntary flinch. The silence, which had been heavy before, now became crushing, suffocating. All nascent thoughts, all flickering curiosities were extinguished by the sheer weight of his presence. They could only watch and wait and feel the terror bloom within their core. The devil surveyed the assembly. His gaze was patient. It was ancient. It was as if he had all the time in the universe, and indeed perhaps he did. He did not rush. His eyes, dark pools reflecting no light, moved slowly from one cluster of souls to another. He saw their fear. He felt their silent terror. It did not seem to affect him. It was perhaps expected, or perhaps simply irrelevant. The silence stretched, amplifying the fear with every passing moment, each soul feeling uniquely pinned by that dispassionate scrutiny. Then he spoke. His voice was not a shout, nor a whisper. It was a perfectly modulated tone, calm and clear, that cut through the oppressive silence like a shard of ice. It reached every soul, vibrating within their very essence. "What is the gift," he asked, the words unhurried, deliberate, "that you wish to possess before you embark upon the world?" The question hung in the air, simple, direct, yet laden with unimaginable consequence. The choice was theirs, and his. A ripple of something other than fear passed through the crowd of souls. Hesitation, yes, but also a dawning spark of calculation, of desire. The devil's question, though stark, offered an opportunity. For a long moment no one moved. Then slowly a small cluster of souls detached itself from the main body. They drifted forward, their shimmers seeming to coalesce, to gain a fraction more solidity, emboldened by a shared, unspoken ambition that now found its focus. They stopped a respectful distance from the calm figure. Their designated spokesman, a soul whose light pulsed with a slightly more assertive rhythm, found its voice. It trembled, not entirely from fear anymore, but from the audacity of its request and the fervent hope of its fulfillment. "We desire power," it declared, the nascent voice gaining a sliver of strength. "The power to command, the power to lead, the power to shape the destinies of others, to bend them to our will. We wish to be rulers, to stand above the multitude." The request hung in the chill air, stark and ambitious. The devil nodded slowly, a deliberate, almost imperceptible movement of his head. A flicker of something unreadable, perhaps ancient amusement or profound weariness, passed through his dark eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Power," he mused, his voice still even, still devoid of judgment or enthusiasm. "A popular choice, a heavy mantle. It shall be yours as you request. You will find that others will indeed bend to your will. You will lead, and they will follow." The words were a simple statement of fact, a promise delivered without flourish. The group of souls who had asked for power seemed to glow faintly, their forms taking on a sharper, more defined edge. An air of newfound yet subtly unsettling confidence settled upon them. They had their gift. They receded back into the periphery, not rejoining the main crowd, but forming their own distinct knot. The remaining souls watched them go, their ethereal forms flickering with a complex mixture of envy, apprehension, and a dawning realization of the choices that lay before them. The stakes were becoming clearer. The first group's departure seemed to break a dam of reticence. Another group, visibly larger this time, surged forward with less hesitation. Their forms seemed to shimmer with a particular intensity, a brightness that was less about inherent light and more about a reflected gleam, an anticipatory avarice that was almost palpable. They pushed through the other, more timid souls, their collective desire giving them a focused momentum. They too stopped before the devil, their eagerness barely contained within their nebulous shapes. "We wish for gold," their voices chorused, a collection of whispers that somehow merged into a single clear demand. It was less hesitant, more insistent than the plea for power had been. Wealth beyond all measure, mountains of it, hordes of it, the comfort it brings, the security it promises, the influence it commands. We wish for riches that will never end. Their desire was naked, unadorned by any pretense of noble purpose. It was a simple primal craving for material abundance. The devil's lips curved into what might have been a smile. It was a thin, almost imperceptible movement, holding no warmth, no joy, only a detached acknowledgement of a familiar human failing. "Gold," he echoed, his voice smooth as worn silk. "The glitter that blinds so many, the weight that anchors souls to the earth. It shall be yours as you desire. You will want for no material thing. Riches will flow to you and through you and around you." He offered no warning, no caveat, just the granting of their wish. This group, upon hearing his words, began to shimmer with an intense, almost dazzling golden light. Their forms seemed to solidify further, taking on a metallic sheen. They practically vibrated with satisfaction before moving aside, their collective focus already turning inwards, contemplating the endless treasures that would be theirs. The air in the antechamber felt heavier now, thick, not just with fear, but with the potent aroma of fulfilled and unfulfilled desires. The other souls shifted restlessly, the pressure to choose, and choose wisely, mounting with each granted boon. Following the seekers of gold, a third contingent emerged from the thinning crowd. These souls were different. Their forms were less distinct than those who craved power or riches, more ethereal, almost translucent. They moved with a certain fluid grace, a calculated poise that suggested an awareness of how they were perceived, even in this pre-incarnate state. They did not rush, but glided forward, their collective presence exuding a subtle confidence that was more unnerving than the overt ambition of the previous groups. They approached the devil with an air of quiet expectation. One of their number stepped forward, or rather flowed slightly ahead of the others. Its voice, when it spoke, was smooth, almost hypnotic, like the gentle lapping of water against a shore, belying the steel beneath. "We seek the gift of speech," it intoned, each word carefully chosen, perfectly enunciated. Not mere chatter, but true eloquence, the power to persuade, the ability to control minds and hearts through words, to make others believe what we wish them to believe, to follow where we lead them with our rhetoric. The devil's gaze, usually sweeping, lingered on this group for a moment longer. There was no change in his expression, yet one could sense a different quality to his attention, perhaps a grudging respect for the subtlety of their desire. "Control through words," he stated, his voice a low murmur. "A dominion built on breath and belief, a most insidious form of power. This gift too is granted. Your tongues will be silver. Your arguments will be difficult to resist. Men will hang on your every utterance." The group who had asked for eloquence seemed to absorb this promise, their ethereal forms flickering with a new, almost manipulative energy. A silvery sheen now clung to them, and they carried themselves with an enhanced grace, a knowing look in their nascent features. They too moved aside, joining the other gifted clusters, leaving behind a much smaller, more hesitant collection of souls. The air was now crackling with the residue of these potent gifts, a silent testament to the choices made and the paths now irrevocably set. Section 6. The solitary dissenter, a spirit apart. Among the few remaining souls, those who had not yet stepped forward, one stood apart, or rather, it drifted slightly isolated from the others, not by choice perhaps, but by an inherent difference that was becoming more apparent. It seemed younger, if such a concept applied here. Its shimmer was less defined by any specific burgeoning desire for power, gold, or influence, but more by a nascent curiosity, a quiet observation, and perhaps a flicker of something that might one day become defiance. It watched the proceedings with an intensity that was different from the fearful awe of the others. The devil's gaze, having dismissed the newly gifted orators, swept over the diminished remainder of the assembly. His attention, impartial yet all-encompassing, seemed to pass over the huddled few, and then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible focus, it settled on this solitary figure. The oppressive silence, which had momentarily been filled with the whispers of supplication, returned with a vengeance. It was thick now with unspoken expectation, all attention in this strange, timeless place drawn towards the lone soul who had not asked. The young man, for he now had a semblance of that form, a more defined outline than the purely ethereal beings around him, felt the weight of that ancient gaze. It was not hostile, not exactly. It was something far more unsettling, a calm, analytical scrutiny. He did not cower as the others had. He did not rush forward to stammer out a belated request. He simply met that gaze, or tried to, though looking into the devil's eyes was like staring into twin voids. He remained still, a silent question in his stance, a tension built in the non-air, a palpable thing. The other remaining souls, few as they were, seemed to shrink away further, their faint lights dimming, leaving him even more isolated under that potent scrutiny. He felt a strange calm settle over him, a quietude amidst the almost tangible fear that radiated from the others. It wasn't bravery, not yet. It was something else, a simple inability to want what the others had so eagerly grasped, a nascent sense of self that recoiled from the easy answers. Section 7. The Unspoken Wish, a Rejection of Offered Boons. The devil, his attention fully fixed on the solitary soul, finally broke the profound silence. His voice, still calm, still devoid of any discernible emotion, addressed the young man directly. "You," he stated, the word echoing slightly in the vastness, "you stand apart. You ask for nothing. Do you not desire a boon, a small advantage before you descend into the tapestry of existence? All others have chosen. What is your wish? Or have you no ambition, no desire to shape your path?" The young man looked towards the separate clusters of souls. He saw the ones who had chosen power, already seeming to radiate a cold authority. He saw those who had chosen gold, their forms gleaming with a hard, metallic light. He saw the eloquent ones, their silvered outlines already practicing subtle sways. And in their satisfaction, he perceived a hollowness, a trade-off that felt too costly. "These gifts," he began, his voice surprisingly steady, though quiet, "they seem less like gifts and more like chains, binding the wearer to a single narrow path." He turned his gaze back to the devil, meeting the ancient entity's unnerving stare with a newfound clarity. "I wish for no such gift," he declared, his voice gaining a quiet firmness. "I will take my chances as I am, with whatever I might naturally possess or learn. I reject what you offer. I will walk my own path, unburdened by a destiny chosen in shadow before I have even drawn my first breath." The words spoken into the vast, attentive silence were simple, yet they carried the weight of an immense, uncalculated risk. A collective shock, a silent gasp of disbelief, rippled through the assembled souls, both the gifted and the few remaining ungifted. Even the devil, the epitome of impassivity, seemed to pause. If he had possessed eyebrows, one might have imagined it arching slightly, a rejection. It was perhaps not unheard of, but certainly rare enough to be noteworthy. The air crackled with the audacity of the young man's refusal. The silence that followed was different, it was stunned. Section 8. The Devil's Decree, a Curse of Abundance. The devil's calm expression shifted then. It was not to anger nor to surprise, not truly. Instead, something more profound, more unsettling, flickered across his ageless features. It might have been amusement, a terrifying cosmic amusement, or perhaps a deep ancient irony. A rejection, he mused, his voice still soft yet carrying an edge that had not been there before. Bold, or perhaps exceedingly foolish. You spurn my generosity, my carefully curated offerings. You deem them chains. His gaze intensified, pinning the young man in place. You wish for no single gift, little soul, the devil continued, a dangerous silkiness in his tone. You desire to be unburdened, to be free of a pre-selected fate. Then you shall have a fate unlike any other. Since you disdain the singular, you shall be burdened with the plural. You shall receive them all. The words fell like stones into a still pond. sending ripples of dread not just through the young man, but through all who bore witness. This was no reward for his defiance. This was something else entirely. "You will possess power," the devil decreed, his voice taking on a resonant, declarative quality. "But you will not always know how to wield it or when. It will rise in you at inconvenient times and desert you when you need it most. Riches will find their way to you unasked, yet they will bring you no lasting peace, only anxiety and the envy of others. Your words will sway nations, your eloquence undeniable, but your own heart, your deepest truths will often go unheard, misunderstood even by yourself. You will feel all human joys with an intensity that can break you, and all human sorrows will carve canyons in your soul, magnified beyond mortal measure," the devil concluded, his voice now a near whisper that thrummed with ancient power. "You will possess every spiritual insight, glimpse the workings of the cosmos, yet find no solace, no lasting enlightenment, only more questions. This is my gift to you, rejecter of gifts, the burden of all, the curse of abundance. Now go." And with a dismissive flick of his shadowy wrist, darkness consumed the young man, utter and complete. Section 9. The unsettling dawn, an awakening into amnesia, a jolt. Not the ethereal push into blackness, but a physical jarring shock, cold. Not the ancient pervasive cold of the cloud towers, but the biting chill of night air rushing through a shattered car window. The smell was wrong too, not ozone and stardust, but stale upholstery, spilled coffee, and the faint, acrid scent of gasoline. He gasped, sucking in a lungful of this strange damp air, sitting bolt upright with a violent suddenness that made his head spin. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He was in a car, an old beaten-up sedan, its dashboard cracked, its seats torn. It was parked, engine off, on what looked like a deserted country road, trees pressing in on either side like dark, silent sentinels. The car's own headlights cut a swathe through the oppressive darkness ahead, illuminating a stretch of wet asphalt and the dense foliage beyond. His head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache centered just behind his eyes. He blinked, trying to focus, trying to understand. Where was he? How did he get here? Confusion was a thick fog in his mind, impenetrable and disorienting. Who was he? He reached up to touch his face, his fingers exploring unfamiliar contours. He looked at his hands, resting on the steering wheel. They were his, surely, but they felt alien, disconnected. He tried to summon his name, any name, but his mind was a terrifying blank. His past? A void. Memories of family, friends, childhood, work, all gone, as if wiped clean by an invisible hand. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. Only one thing remained, vivid and terrifyingly real in the otherwise empty landscape of his mind. A dream, or was it a dream? Towers of dark, swirling clouds, a calm, emotionless figure offering choices. The murmuring pleas of indistinct souls, his own voice rejecting the gifts. And then, the curse, the terrible, all-encompassing curse of abundance. That memory, that scene played out in his mind with crystal clarity, feeling more substantial, more true than this cold car and this dark road. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that the dream was not just a dream, and he was utterly, terrifyingly alone.